Now, let's jump into this. We're in Joshua chapter 6 today. As we're moving through the book of Joshua, we have moved from, on the other side of the Jordan River, till we got right to the edge of the Jordan River, till we stepped into the river, till the waters parted, we walked through the river, now we're on the other side, and now we're facing Jericho. Now, when we face the future, sometimes we worry a little bit about the future. Sometimes we get in that dynamic of, okay, I'm waiting. Anyone here like waiting? I do not like waiting at all, okay? And so it's one of those dynamics where also you get tired of waiting. Well, guess what? Today is a day where you don't have to wait any longer. Today is a day where we get to act, all right? Today is a day that I believe that if you'll move from waiting to acting, you're gonna see some victory in your own life today. Let me say this. If I get to a place in this message where I'm going too long in order to save time at the end, I'm just gonna cut it because I believe the response time today. Let me tell you what's not important. What's not important is me teaching you more information. What is important is for you to take the truth of God and apply it to your life. And so we're gonna prioritize time at the end of this message. Now, as we think about the Jericho battle, in some regards, if we look at it from a distance, we oversimplify it, because we think, oh, well, they walked around Jericho and they shouted and, wow, amazing miracle happened, but we don't get into the details behind the miracle. Now, let's think about it this way. They were to walk around Jericho one time each day for 6 days. Jericho, it's about 1.5 miles around Jericho because they're walking behind the Ark of the Covenant that represents the presence of God, because there's hundreds of thousands of people. You don't walk as fast. So it takes you about 1 hour to do this walk. And so once a day for 6 days, they're walking around Jericho. And then on the 7th day, they've got to walk around Jericho 7 times. Now listen, there were no signs of progress the first day. I mean, if we're really honest, this sounds like a stupid assignment. Who's ever heard of this type of warfare before? Let's just take the men. There's approximately 600,000 men, and Joshua, as the leader of the army, says, we're gonna go against the most fortified city in the world that's known to have giants in it, valiant warriors, and we're gonna walk around the walled city once a day for 6 days. I think during that time, I'd be thinking, well, I think we're giving them time to figure out how to defeat us. This is illogical. And then if I did it once, I'd be like, okay, give me a sign that I'm doing the right thing here, And so then they walk around it the second day, and there's still no sign of breakthrough. And they walk around it the third and the fourth and the fifth day, and there's gotta be a little bit of temptation there to wonder, what are we doing? How in the world is this going to work? Nothing happened on the first day, the second day, the third day, the fourth day, the fifth day. The 6th day, nothing has happened. And the 7th day, you want me to walk around Jericho 7 times and shout. See, on that 6th day, there was no cracking of the wall. Hey, did y'all see? I think it's gonna happen. Did y'all see the cracks in the wall? None of that. See, the breakthrough then and now frequently happens all of a sudden. It's gonna come all of a sudden. And the more that we will truly learn how to submit and surrender ourselves to the Holy Spirit, and the more we will learn how to listen to his voice and obey his promptings, and the more we will learn how to do the things that he tells us to do versus the things we want to do, you're gonna see the breakthroughs happen all of a sudden. Now today, in this passage of scripture, I want us to put ourselves in their shoes, and today is the seventh day. So today, imagine we are walking around Jericho 7 times. That's approximately 10 miles, all right? That's approximately 7 hours of walking. What if today is your day of breakthrough? As you're listening, would you perhaps, whether it's on your phone, whether it's on a sheet of paper, would you begin to write down right now what's the greatest breakthrough you need? And then would you ask for that breakthrough today? Now, the breakthrough may not come in complete fullness today, but the walls can begin to come down today. So what if today is your 7th day? What if today is your day of healing? What if today is your day of victory? What if today is your day of getting over the hump? What if today's the day that God releases the angels in heaven to take your prayer request and begin to deliver it? See, don't lose heart on the 7th day. Don't lose heart in the 10-mile walk. Don't lose heart, but persevere, press on. We're gonna rediscover the soldier in you. We know that he tells us to shout. Where's your shout? See, sometimes you've got to have a shout to change the atmosphere. A couple weeks ago, some friends in the life of the church gave me some tickets to go to a Tigers game, and I was sitting kind of on the second row right next to the Tigers bench. That's dangerous for me. Because see, then I'm close enough for me to think that my opinion matters. I'm close enough to believe that the referee can hear me and wants to hear me. And this game wasn't going the direction that I felt it needed to go. And a couple of the strength coaches were sitting literally okay, Preston's right here, I'm sitting here, there's one of the coaches. And I turned to him and said, you need to tell Penny to go get a technical. He needs to shout. We gotta change something in this place. There's just times you have to do something to disrupt yourself and disrupt others. See, today is a day for you to take up the presence of God. See, the Ark of the Covenant had to go before them. They had to take it, and they had to allow the Ark of the Covenant to march around the walls of Jericho before them. Today is the day. Now hear me. This is a word for you. It comes straight from the passage in Joshua. Today's the day to go forward. Go forward. See, the enemy's always talking about your past, Your past is forgiven. Your past is paid for. Stop dealing with your past and go forward. But notice he says go forward and march. The march indicates there's a purpose. And today's the day to blow the trumpets. What if you heard a sound today that was that trumpet sound that says, that's the sound of victory. That's the sound of victory. That's the sound that tells me it's time to shout. And then today is the day to take the city. Take the city. We are named one city for a reason, because we have no intentions of playing church. We are not a gathered assembly, we are a gathered army. So, where are the faith statements in the 6th chapter of Joshua? Joshua chapter 6, verse 1 and 2. Now Jericho was tightly shut. Now watch this. Because of the sons of Israel. This is interesting. I'm gonna get into this in just a moment. You kind of put a pin right there and remember this. It was tightly shut because of the sons of Israel. No one went out and no one came in. But the Lord said to Joshua, see, I've handed Jericho over to you with its kings and valiant warriors. What has God handed over to you? Where have you proven yourself trustworthy to be entrusted with the mission so that he hands it over to you and says, go forward and march? But do you see and realize that God looks at problems completely different than we look at problems? See, we must learn to see problems from God's perspective. We've got to remember that in Joshua 5:1, it says their hearts, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the people of Jericho, their hearts had melted with fear. It also says that there's no spirit in them any longer. And now we see in Joshua 6:1, it says they're tightly shut in. Notice this, the roles have flipped. This is so important. The people of Jericho, they aren't fearless anymore. They're actually fearful of the Israelites. The giants are fearful. The most fortified city is fearful. See, they aren't strong anymore. They're acting weak. They're acting like they're the grasshoppers. See, they aren't courageous anymore. They're the ones acting like cowards. They're tightly shut in. No one goes out, no one comes in. Back to verse 2, he says, see, I have handed Jericho over to you with its kings and valiant warriors. So, who are you going to believe about the future? Are you going to believe God's promises or the enemy's lies? Stop believing in the enemy's power. Now listen, the enemy's a liar. He's an accuser, and here's what he does. He lies about his own power. Then he lies about God's power. And then he lies about the size and the strength of the problem. Because none of that is true when God says, see, I have handed Jericho over to you. God's actually saying it's not hard work. God's actually saying what looks impossible is going to be easy. I'm going to accomplish it with a shout. No half-hearted shouts, by the way. Let me just say this real quick. If one of you decides to shout, give a little warning to the people around you so you don't startle someone and create a heart attack, okay? Now listen, No half-hearted shouts. No timid shouts. Why? There's a lion inside of you. Joshua 3-5, chapter 6, verses 3-5. And you shall march around the city, all the men of war circling the city once. And you shall do so for 6 days. Also 7 priests shall carry 7 trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark. Then on the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times. And the priests shall blow the trumpets, and it shall be that when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the trumpet, all the people shall shout. Now watch, with a great, great shout. And the wall of the city will fall down flat. And the people shall go up, everyone straight ahead. Now, before we get to the final lap on the 7th day, watch what he says in verse 10. This is interesting. But Joshua commanded the people, saying, you shall not shout, nor let your voice be heard, nor let a word proceed from your mouth until the day I tell you, shout. Then you shall shout. So imagine how hard this is. They're actually supposed to walk around Jericho for 6 days in silence. You try doing anything in silence. Listen, it's important to remember that after the first day in silence, no signs of a miracle yet. The second days of silence, no signs of a miracle yet. Why the silence? Because it was their conversation that kept them out of the promised land 40 years ago. It was them talking about fear instead of faith. It was them talking about how big the giants are instead of how big their God is. So don't mess up the miracle with your words. Let me say that again. Don't mess up the miracle with your words. I mean, can you imagine how hard it is to keep silent in those circumstances? And then that 7th day, that 7th lap, the silence is about to break. Now, when I say don't mess up the miracle with your words, I want to ask you to do something. This is an invitation. I don't know why you would not take the invitation, but I want to ask you to do this. There's a lot of times people talk about fasting for 40 days, and they do that in the context of food. I'm not going to ask you to do that this particular time. There's a day and a time that we need to do that. But I am going to ask you, would you fast negativity for 40 days? What would happen if you fasted negativity for 40 days? Karen and I were meeting with a guy the other day that is the leader of a marketing company. He said the biggest problem with Memphians is that they're too negative about their own city. Listen, the moment you feel negativity emerge, whether it's about yourself, the enemy tries to make you negative about yourself. Whether it's about the people closest to you, your family. I mean, why would we get negative about a spouse or one of our children or a sibling? Why do we always want to use negativity in a comparison way that if I can knock them down, I'll look better? And then what if we fasted negativity in all the ways that it relates to what God can do versus us thinking what the enemy says he can't do? What if we fasted negativity about our city and we began to replace negativity with positivity? Because see, in fasting, there's a replacement principle. Everyone in fasting, they just talk about the denial of food. When you fast from food, you're supposed to actually take that amount of time that you would spend eating and spend that time praying. So what if you begin to sense that negativity emerging and you just caught it before it was spoken and you prayed and asked God to reverse it and asked God to give you to replace the negative with the positive? See, that's how we go. Watch this. Fasting should always result in feasting. So at the end of the fast, everyone wants to feast. And so I'm not asking you just to fast from negativity. I'm asking you to replace it with positivity. What would happen in your own life if you fasted negativity, replaced it with positivity for the next 40 days? What if you made war on everything that was negative? I mean, literally, like you said, I am not allowing that to occupy space in my mind or heart. I am kicking that out. Make zero allowances for negativity in your life. What would you look like not complaining for 40 days? April 25th would be the 40th day. You can resume your negativity then. No, keep fasting it. So what does it look like to win the battle on the 7th day? Number one, follow his presence. Follow his presence. See, it goes back to God's definition of success in Joshua 1:8. Meditate upon his word day and night. Be careful to obey all that is written in it. Then you will make your way prosperous. Then you will have good success. Number two, go forward. Joshua 6:7 says, go forward and march around the city. Focus on the future, not the past. Then focus on your next step of obedience. Give yourself a specific step of obedience, and that fasting from negativity can be that step. Just do that one thing and you'll be amazing. You'll be amazed at how many walls will fall down. Number three, take the city. Joshua 6:16 says, for the Lord has given you the city. What has the Lord promised you? Watch this. He's promised his presence. Joshua 1:5, just as I was with Moses, I will be with you. He's promised his power. No man will be able to stand before you all the days of your life. He's promised his provision. Every place that the sole of your foot treads, I will give to you. He's promised his protection. Do not be frightened and do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. And he has promised his victory. See, I've handed Jericho over to you with the king and its valiant warriors. A pastor friend gave me this prophetic word the other day, and it was wrapped around Romans 16:20. Listen to this. The God of peace will soon crush Satan under your feet. Grab a hold of that for yourself. The God of peace, see, when you begin to fast negativity, you replace it with positivity. Peace is gonna come into your life, and peace is gonna crush Satan under your feet. Like, listen, stop being timid. There's a lion inside of you. Man, you tempted me to say things like, I get fired up and I just want to say things that don't sound preacher-like. Oh, listen to this. The God of peace will soon crush Satan under your feet. Stop allowing him to live. He is dead and defeated. Number four, don't covet. It says, do not covet them, the things designated for destruction. Joshua 6, verse 18 and 20. But as for you, only keep yourself from the things designated for destruction, so that you do not covet them and take some of the designated things. So when they plunder the city, there are some things they're not to take for themselves. They need to continue to trust that God has brought them into the fullness of his promises. It is a land flowing with milk and honey. They need to receive God's best and not distrust God by taking matters into their own hand and coveting something that someone else has, thinking someone else has something better to give them than God has to give them. Number 5. No compromise. No compromise. No compromise. 6:21. They utterly destroyed everything in the city, both man and woman, young and old, ox, sheep, and donkey, with the edge of the sword. What are you withholding from God? Listen, every little bitty small sin wants to grow up and become a big sin. And a lot of times we try to hold onto these little small sins, thinking we can dabble in them and that they won't ever become big sins. Take the edge of the sword and kill it. No compromise. There's a line inside of you. Stop flirting with sin. The enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy. Stop playing with fire. Take authority over it and be victorious. So now with all of that, listen, today is the 7th day. Today is your day of healing. Did you write something down? Where do you need a breakthrough? Where do you need a wall to fall down? What prayer do you need to answer? Would you go from generic to specific and identify something? If you're generic, how do you know God answers the prayer? God tells us to be bold. I think it honors him more to ask big prayers than it does small prayers, because now my prayers are in relationship to my view of the bigness of God. So today is your day of healing. Today is your day of exercising faith, where faith will move a mountain. What mountain do you need moved in your life? Today, some of you need a new job, and ask God to open the door and give you the job. Today, some of you need a better job. Today, some of you need to say, I am putting the past behind me. I'm not talking about it anymore, and I am moving forward. I am committing to fast negativity and replace it with positivity. Today, I am asking for the strength from God to be one who perseveres and presses on. Listen, I'm telling the spirit of quit to go to hell. The spirit that tells me to quit, hey, go to hell where you belong. I'm not quitting. And today, you need to be courageous. Joshua 24:15, choose for yourselves today whom you will serve. Now listen to what he says. Whether the gods which your fathers served, which were beyond the Euphrates River, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are now living, but as for me and my house, we're serving the Lord. So, the worship team's gonna come down, and we're gonna sing a song that we've sung many times here called All of a Sudden. And I wanna ask you to get out of your comfort zone, all right? And I wanna ask you to not view this as the end of the service and I am going to think about lunch or think about the ball games this afternoon, or think about the brackets. I'm going to ask you to take the authority of God and shout at something. And while we're singing, and I've told them, I said, bring it all. Let's worship together. And when we're worshiping, then you can shout as loud as you want to and not startle someone and scare them to death, all right? But I think there's some shouting that needs to occur in this place in order for the walls to fall flat, in order for you to be known by victory instead of defeat. So would you ask God, now watch this, what's the biggest wall in your life? What's the biggest wall? And would you ask him to tear it down right now? And sometimes, some of you need to come down here and worship, and let me say this to the leaders in the life of this church, and to everyone else. Sometimes we lay hands on people to pray for God to do a work. And when we do that, we always do that in a very respectful and appropriate way, and maybe put a hand on someone's shoulder or something. We ask for permission. But I believe that when the apostles laid hands on people, they weren't going, oh, well, let me just do this symbolic act because that was done to me, and there was great power when it happened to me, but I'm gonna deny that power right now and not believe that power is gonna continue forward, and I'm just gonna symbolically lay my hands on you. What if we laid hands and we said, God, whatever faith is in me, give it to this person right here and move the mountain? What if we laid hands and said, God, would you take, and I don't know that I fully get it and understand it, I'm just the vessel, I'm the carrier, but would you release healing and say, God, be healed? Would you minister to one another? If you see someone and you can tell they're dealing with God, don't counsel them. They don't need your counseling. Would you just say, can I pray for you? Don't pray a 5-minute prayer. Listen, if you're blind, just pray, see, okay? The power of God comes when we act upon it. And it's time for us to act. And one of the ways we need to act is to shout. And so let's stand and let's worship together.